guys, we're back. Did you miss us? Because we missed you.
Welcome back, finally, to another episode of Healthy Talk, empowering your wellness one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Rachel Mann, and today we're discussing a topic that many families encounter but may not fully understand: skilled care. What is skilled care? Who qualifies for it? And what makes Boone County Hospital's skilled care unit unique? To answer these questions and more, I'm joined by Addison Enns, a social worker at Boone County Hospital who plays an essential role in helping patients and their families navigate the skilled care process. Addison, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So to start, can you share a little bit about your role at Boone County Hospital?
So I'm a social worker here at the hospital, like you said. My main role is primarily to do discharge planning for patients who need some additional resources to better prepare for going home. In the emergency department, there might be patients who need additional help with things that don't require an inpatient admission, so I can help on that outpatient level as well. Basically, my goal is to help patients get back home or back to their current living environment with the most success.
What inspired you to become a social worker, particularly in a healthcare setting?
Right out of college, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do in regards to the specific role. I just knew I wanted to help others. So I just knew that I wanted to be a support for people who are in need. And after completing my master's in social work almost 10 years ago, I began working in a critical access hospital. And it took me no time at all to realize that I love helping those in the healthcare setting when they are often at their most vulnerable moments.
Let's just start with the basics. What exactly is skilled care, and how would you say that it differs from other levels of care like assisted living or long-term care?
Skilled care is a type of care that patients receive if they are experiencing an injury or recovering from an illness that had landed them in the hospital at any point. To go to skilled care, you are basically below your current or your what we would call prior level of functioning at home. So if an individual is independently living at home, doing all tasks themselves, but they're in the hospital and they have had like a bout of pneumonia or a COPD exacerbation and it's knocked them down a couple pegs, they might qualify for skilled care that will help them rehabilitate towards going home. So it is what we would call a short-term service. And that differs from assisted living because assisted living is a level of care in itself. People reside in assisted living. Same with long-term care. Long-term care is for the folks who need that longer care, the 24-hour support. So the difference between skilled care and those services is that skilled care is more short-term and it is geared towards rehabilitation.
Okay. Got it. Who would you say typically qualifies for skilled care? You mentioned someone who might have pneumonia. What kind of medical or rehabilitative services would someone like that receive?
So just to go off that same example, an individual who has pneumonia, they might be in bed for several days, not being able to function much because they're feeling really crummy. Obviously, the older we get, the longer we're down with an illness, the weaker we get. So a person might qualify for skilled care because they can no longer do what they have to do to go home. For younger folks, it's a little bit easier to bounce back. We might be in the hospital with pneumonia for a couple days and then we can go right home. Like I said, the older we get, the harder it is to recuperate. We take longer to get our bodies back to normal function. So the goal is to provide them with therapy services so that they can get back to their level of function at home.
What are some common reasons that patients transition to skilled care at Boone County Hospital?
I would say some of the most common reasons are any kind of major fracture, going to have our hip fractures, femur fractures. We've seen different kind of leg fractures, your tibia, those kinds of things that require legitimate therapy, changes in their weight-bearing status, so they might not be able to bear complete weight on that limb that has been injured. We sometimes see skilled care for folks who are even just having a routine knee or hip replacement. It's not as common, but it does happen, especially for those who are already a little bit debilitated prior to those procedures. And then we do see it quite often for folks who were even just admitted to the hospital with, let's say, anemia, or like I said earlier, pneumonia might cause them to just be weak and they need that extra oomph to get them home.
As a social worker, how do you support patients and their families throughout the skilled care process?
kind of before the process even starts, I coordinate getting insurance involved, working with the physician, working with the rehabilitative team, working with the patient and family. And then while they are actually in skilled care and receiving those services, I help with making sure that they're going to have all the services they need when it's time to discharge home or wherever it is that they're going to discharge to. We want to make sure that they have anything in place, such as home health, meals on wheels, any type of outpatient services that they need to follow up on. So I'm pretty involved with that. And then even just ongoing support throughout their hospitalization, making sure that they feel they're getting the care that they need and that they deserve here at the hospital. So I can also be an advocate for their care.
I'm sure you run into some challenges. Could you give us some examples of what those might be when making decisions about skilled care, and how are you able to help those families navigate?
I'd say the biggest challenge that patients and families face is whether or not they even need the skilled care in the first place.
Okay.
It can be very frightening when we go to a patient and say, look, you're medically ready for a discharge. Your initial illness has basically resolved. We're ready to discharge you. However, based on your progress with therapy, you are truly not able to return home yet because you're too weak. We fear that you will fall or you will become injured and get sicker. So a big challenge is just supporting the patient and their loved ones with encouraging them to continue to get that proper care so that they can be successful when they go home and try to avoid another admission to the hospital.
Yeah. And understanding that those things are in place to help them. I think a lot of people have a hard time accepting that they need help.
Yes. Yeah. And I know oftentimes when we say, well, we'd like you to stay at the hospital a little bit longer, and they hear a little bit longer and they're like, no, I want to go home right now. I have to feed my cat, or I have, hog chores to do. So it can really be detrimental to a person's plans.
Yeah. Can you walk us through the process of transitioning a patient into skilled care?
Typically, our average situation would be a patient being admitted to the hospital for injury or illness. And then if they are looking like they need further therapy, whether that's physical therapy, occupational therapy, or even antibiotics via IV, the first step is making sure that they're agreeable to stay. And then if they are, then we have to check their insurance, make sure that if they do need an authorization to approve their stay, that we go through the proper channels and steps to obtain that authorization. Once we get an authorization, then it really is as simple as moving them to one of the rooms down what we call our swing hallway. That's where most of the patients go who are receiving skilled care here. Any of the other major changes are done on the backside. The patient and family don't particularly have to worry about that stuff, and their care from an outsider standpoint really doesn't change.
Let's talk about skilled care specifically at Boone County Hospital. What makes Boone County Hospital's skilled care unit unique?
With us being the only hospital in Boone County, we are the only hospital-based skilled care. So there are skilled care units in nursing homes, of course. We are unique because we tend to be more of what we would call a short-term place to receive those therapies. So I know it's kind of encouraging for people to come to Boone County Hospital to receive the skilled care because they know it's a short-term process. They see the light at the end of the tunnel that they should be going home. Absolutely nothing against skilled care at the nursing homes, but it is more frightening sometimes for folks to go to skilled care at the nursing home because they're afraid that they'll never leave. So we also do our best to try to bust that myth too, that it's still short term, it's just in a different location.
Sure. How does the interdisciplinary team work together to ensure patients receive the best possible care?
The entire team works very close on a regular basis. Like you said, it's an interdisciplinary team because we have so many different disciplines. We've got our therapy team, that's physical, occupational, speech therapy. We've got pharmacy, nursing, myself as the social worker, of course, the physician. We try to work as closely as we can on a daily basis. And then every week we have a care conference. At this time, they're scheduled every Tuesday. We start those at 1:00. Every patient who's receiving skilled therapies gets a care conference with the entire team, with the exception of the physician because they're in clinic. So we give them an update afterwards. But we get that time to be in the patient room with the patient and their caregivers to answer questions and provide progress, talk about discharge planning. Like I said, that's every Tuesday, but we do stay in contact on a daily basis to make sure that we're all on the same page.
I'm sure that comprehensive care helps your patients feel at ease too.
Yeah, it's a nice time to allow them to ask a bunch of questions for a bunch of different people.
Instead of, oh, I have a question. Okay, I'll go get them.
Exactly. Yep. And then that allows the caregivers to really do the same thing, to ask questions, get answers from the entire team, see what we're looking at as a whole in regards to things that the patient might need to continue to work on towards their goals, what the plan is to go home or go to a different living situation upon discharge.
What types of therapy or rehabilitation services are available for patients in skilled care? You listed some off, like talking about your team, physical therapists, occupational therapists.
The different rehabilitative services includes physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. In fact, in order to qualify for skilled care, you have to at least have the physical therapy discipline. For instance, an individual would not qualify for skilled care just for occupational needs.
Okay.
Or just for speech therapy needs. So we do have those three disciplines that all work very closely together. And then I would also consider one of the therapies to be antibiotic therapies, because another main reason for skilled care, which I failed to mention before, is an individual might need long-term antibiotics. So when I say long-term, we're looking at like 6 weeks of antibiotics. They might be receiving those antibiotics 3 times a day. So it is really hard for them to go home and come in as an outpatient 3 times a day.
Sure.
It might be hard for them to do those therapies at home with home care. So it is often best for the patient and their progress to stay in the hospital and get those therapies.
On average, how long would you say that someone is in skilled care?
Generally, we try to keep it around a few weeks or less. However, it truly is case by case. And it also makes a huge difference on what they have for insurance.
Sure.
Unfortunately, in this day and age, we do have to rely on the authorization, like I mentioned before, from insurance. A person's insurance plan might come back and say, hey, looks like they're doing really well. We expect them to discharge in 48 hours. That usually does work out pretty well with how the patient is doing. However, sometimes it gets to a point where that patient isn't actually ready to go, but their insurance company is. So if we have to worry about that, then we're going off the timeline of the insurance company. Other insurances like traditional Medicare, we don't have to get an authorization from them. We do, of course, still have to go off of Medicare guidelines. When looking at the length of stay, the patient has to be making continued progress. We have to be getting closer towards their goals, whatever those may be for discharge. But we can generally keep folks a little bit longer if we don't have the insurance company coming back and saying they have to discharge right now. We have patients, we have one right here who's actually been here for several weeks. It's one of those things where every week we're just that much closer to getting home.
Sure.
And the goal is to go home. So we want to make sure that we can support him the best that we can with that. So we just continue assessing him each week, and he's making progress. So he continues to qualify. So he's been here longer than the average person, but it's worked out really well.
Many families probably worry about financial aspect. You just talked about insurance. What resources are available to help those who are worried about that navigate insurance or payment options?
It's always going to depend on the specific insurance of every person. And it's just not a one size fits all. So one thing that I encourage people to do is if they're interested in skilled care, they need to get a hold of their insurance company, see what they have for skilled care benefits, see what kind of timeline they're looking at. Some patients might not even have skilled care benefits. So then unfortunately, it's not even an option. We would typically see that in our much younger folks.
Okay. Like you said, they're healthier, they bounce back faster.
Yep. And so a lot of our younger folks, they might not have an insurance plan that provides skilled benefits. All of our Medicare plans, even the Medicaid plans, are going to offer some kind of a skilled benefit, but they might differ from plan to plan. Sometimes a patient might have a copay for their skilled care. And if that's something that they are unable to cover, then there's the option to meet with our financial assistance department and see if there's any kind of assistance that they can receive, whether that's how to pay that copay, help getting that covered. So there are those options. It just takes a little bit of homework on each individual's part.
What advice would you give to someone who's maybe hesitant about having a loved one or themselves having to go into skilled care?
I try to reassure every single patient who is a little bit uneasy about that process. I want to let them know that it is a short-term transition. When we were talking about the different levels of care, like long-term care versus assisted living, skilled care truly is a short-term level of care. So it does not mean any kind of permanent placement, not going to stay in the hospital forever. When a family or a patient is uneasy about it, I just try to remind them that this is truly just to get them recovered, get them rehabilitated, get them back to their prior living environment or wherever they're going to go so that they can be as independent as possible.
Really getting that it's for your benefit.
Exactly. Yes. So reminding them it might only be a few days. It might be a couple of weeks, but we're not looking at months or years by any means. It truly is short term and you'll benefit in the long run.
How do you help families stay involved in their loved one's care while they're in skilled care?
I encourage family members to participate as much as possible. Of course, we encourage visitors, but I want family members or caregivers to be an active participant in the care conferences that we have every week. I also encourage them to come and at least observe some of the therapy sessions that their loved one is going through so they can see the progress that the patient is making with therapy. It can often be challenging when a family member doesn't feel like their loved one is doing all that well, but they also haven't come in and actually witnessed the progress. So I always encourage them to be actively involved in person. Talking with families in person is so much more beneficial anyways. And then we can all be on the same page in a face-to-face contact. That would be my number one way to encourage them to be involved.
What would you say is the most rewarding part about your job?
I love watching patients progress from the moment they enter skilled care to the moment that they get to discharge to their desired level of care, whether that's going home or to their daughter's house. And that's not just saying patients who we transition from Boone County Hospital inpatient to skilled care. We get a ton of people from outside hospitals. I am in charge of reviewing those charts, making sure that they qualify. And it's always interesting to see that individual show up for skilled care and be admitted. They might be really, really struggling at that time, but then it's amazing how much progress can even be made with 1 week of consistent hard work with therapy. And I just really enjoy watching the progress from day one all the way until they get to discharge. It's truly rewarding. And I get really excited with patients watching them and they get excited. And I think that's the best part is they start to get really excited when they get closer to reaching their goals. And it's extremely encouraging. It reminds me why I enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
And it's why we're here in what I would consider a smaller community. We're not in the bigger cities. And so it's kind of a hidden gem to be able to come and do skilled care here.
Very fortunate that it's here. Yeah. Yes. You don't have to go to Des Moines to do it. Do you have any ways that our community members here in Boone can support skilled care or the people in skilled care or even just better understand the needs of aging patients?
I would say community members can familiarize themselves with the reason we have skilled care, with the program itself, whether that's here or at another facility, and just understand the importance of having that option as a recovery tool for a patient to be successful. I want community members, really anybody, to learn about the different services provided for all ages, but really our elderly folks become the most vulnerable. And, you know, in this day and age, folks want more and more to do what we'd call age in place. They want to stay at home. They want to be as independent as possible, and they can still have so much independence at home while being surrounded with supports that keep them there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Addison, so much for sharing your insights with us today. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to this episode of Healthy Talk. If you have any questions or want to learn more, you can visit our website, www.boonehospital.com. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for upcoming episodes featuring Ethan Patterson, our Director of Physical Therapy, Kelly Flynn discussing our health portal and how you can access your medical information. Chris Hansen's going to be on talking about our pain clinic and many, many more. Until next time, stay informed, stay healthy, and keep the conversation going with Healthy Talk.